We start by seeing Jenny, a kindergarten teacher, dismissing her class and then meeting her partner, Steve. We see him looking at an engagement ring that he plans to show on their beautiful weekend trip to a well-known lake, which is an old flooded quarry. As they drive through a town on the way, they encounter a group of kids on bikes cutting in front of their car, clearly irritating Steve. Nevertheless, they reach a rest area, and a parking spot opens just in time. But once again, Steve is ignored when another car speeds past and steals the spot. Moments later, we see the couple enjoying a drink at an outdoor table, and then they take a nap. The next day, they drive further and enter the trail to their vacation destination. Seeing the entrance blocked for construction reasons, they decide to take an alternative path. Finally reaching their destination, they settle down in a more secluded spot. After a while, everything seems great, so they start their vacation sitting by the water, enjoying each other's company and the view. Suddenly, they hear some local troublemakers disturbing the peace, but Steve asks to ignore them. Sometime later, the rest of the group shows up playing loud music with a dog making a mess everywhere. But instead of going to another area, Steve doesn't mind and goes to play in the water. While the dog continues to bother Jenny, Steve sees that the outing won't go as planned, so he decides to leave the water and confront the young people. He approaches and asks them to turn down the sound, but they pretend not to hear. The youths ignore Steve's request, which irritates him, so he decides to lower the volume himself and asks them to hold the dog as it's scaring his beloved. The girl among them responds with unpleasant words and tells him to leave. Not wanting trouble, Steven decides to go back to Jenny's side and endure the young people's unpleasant noise. Moments later, the group leaves the area, leaving the couple more at ease. Sometime later, we see them setting up a camp for the night. While Jenny picks up some firewood, she hears branches breaking amid the vegetation, finding it strange, but she doesn't alert Steve. Later that night, something watches them from afar, while Steve prepares to propose to Jenny. The couple decides to enter the tent and have a moment of love. However, soon Jenny hears strange noises, but Steve doesn't pay attention. Jenny insists he checks it out, so he does. Jenny stays in the tent, and noticing Steve taking a while, calls out to him. A light shines into their tent, and Jenny asks Steve to stop, but he doesn't respond. She begins to get scared, and suddenly, Steve startles Jenny, entering the tent all at once. The couple then continues to have a pleasant night after that moment. In the morning, Jenny wakes up first and finds their food full of beetles, so they need to return to town and buy more. As they leave, they are surprised by a glass bottle puncturing the car tire, leaving Steve furious and imagining it was the young boys. Fortunately, he came prepared, and they soon return to town. They go for coffee and try to relax a bit. After leaving, Steve passes by one of the streets and sees the bikes of the boys who bothered them before, so he decides to stop. He gets out and goes to the house to talk to one of the parents. Steve enters, but finds no one. Soon a car arrives, making Jenny move the car away. The driver gets out and enters the house, and ends up hearing someone upstairs. Steve, hearing the man coming up, exits through the window and jumps over the fence. He meets with Jenny and starts their weekend again. They drive through the forest and return to the same place as before. Steve, wanting to have fun, grabs Jenny and takes her into the lake for a swim together. Meanwhile, someone watches them from afar among the bushes. Later, Steve returns from swimming with his diving equipment, at which point Jenny was asleep. She looks around and notices her bag is gone, just as Steve was about to propose. Desperate, he rushes to where he left the car, and unfortunately the vehicle was stolen. With nothing else to do, they start hiking to try to find something when suddenly their car appears, and they find out it was the young thugs who stole it. The couple starts following the trail to reach the youths, and by nightfall, the couple finds them. Steve approaches them and asks for what belonged to him. However, the leader of the group says he doesn't know anything. Steve hears his phone, so he gets closer, but the guy starts a physical fight. When the other attempts to harm Steve with a blade, Steve quickly dodges and takes the knife. But when their dog attacks him, in self-defense, Steve ends up injuring and killing it. The demon, the dog's owner, upset, hands over the keys, and soon the couple rushes out of the place. They find the car and get in to leave. A little ahead, they end up getting stuck in a ditch, and the young men catch up to them and throw rocks at them, break the headlights, and leave them blind. Steve accelerates and escapes the lunatic group, but unfortunately, not being able to see anything ahead, he crashes into some trees ahead, injuring himself. Steve gets trapped, and fearing the worst, he asks Jenny to go to the road for help. Soon enough, the gang of criminals arrives at the car and finds Steve, then they capture him. The night passes, and Jenny alone returns to the car, but doesn't find Steve. Seeing a trail of blood, she decides to follow and try to find her boyfriend. She hears the young men nearby, and going to check, she sees Steve tied up, asking to be released. One of the boys asks the leader not to be so rough, but ends up being confronted to hurt the man. Fearing being injured with no choice, the boy takes the knife and cuts Steve's arm, while the girl records on her phone. Jenny, from a distance, sees the atrocity being done to her boyfriend and is in shock, watching the demonic youths injuring Steve. Knowing they will soon kill him, she manages to get a signal on her phone and sends a message, catching the attention of the criminals, who start chasing her. Meanwhile, the wounded Steve manages to slowly free himself from the wires. Jenny manages to knock down the group of young men on bikes and keeps running. She reaches a place where there are some cars from a construction company, and seeing a radio in a locked cabin, she tries to get it. Jenny fails, and seeing the boys approaching, she barely manages to hide above the cabin. One of the boys returns to the place where they kept Steve captive and discovers he's not there. Steve returns to his car and opens the trunk, and the alarm goes off, attracting the attention of the young men. Steve grabs some medical supplies and immediately leaves the area. A little further ahead, he hides to attack whoever approaches him, and when he does, he discovers it's Jenny. She helps him up and they leave. The couple walks through the forest and eventually finds a small wooden cabin. Jenny starts taking care of Steve, even knowing how critical his wounds are. Jenny ends up being surprised at this difficult moment and discovers that Steve was about to propose to her. However, she doesn't have much time to think at that moment and is concerned about finding a way to escape from the young men. The group of boys approaches the cabin and goes to open the door by force, but they don't find the couple. Fortunately, Jenny managed to lift the floorboards and hide in the river, below the cabin. The boys leave the area. Moments later, Jenny pulls Steve out of the water, but he starts to faint. Jenny wakes him up and asks him to hold on until she gets help. She also shows him that she accepts the proposal by putting the ring on his finger, then covers him with leaves and goes in search of help. Jenny later finds a line of power poles. Unsure where to go, she chooses a direction and runs. Unfortunately, Jenny, being careless, steps on an iron rod that pierces her foot. She screams in pain, and not far away the young men hear her. Hearing them, Jenny hides in a hole and, biting a piece of wood, removes the iron rod from her foot. After the pain, she climbs up the slope and rests for a while, but suddenly someone arrives there. It's just a young boy, but not one of those who were looking for her. Thinking he might be good, she asks him to help her get to town. The boy decides to help her, but chooses a path opposite to the power poles. He stops in an open place and says his mother finds him there to pick him up. Suspecting him and seeing a phone, she tries to take his device. Suddenly, the juvenile delinquents arrive at the scene, thanking the other young man for the favor he had done by bringing the woman to them. Then one of them knocks Jenny out. When she wakes up, she realizes she's tied up with Steve's dead body and they're about to be burned. The young boys don't want to continue and do such harm to the woman, but the crazy leader tells them that everyone there was part of it all and they can't stop until they put an end to the couple. The madman forces the youngest to light the fire that is on Steve, and soon the body catches fire. While the madman celebrates, Jenny gathers strength, breaks the weakened ropes, and gets up. She pours fuel between her and the youths and sets it on fire, giving them a chance to escape. The madman screams, holding the youngest, saying he will burn him if Jenny doesn't come back. Knowing he's crazy, Jenny doesn't listen to him, and then hears screams of agony. A few minutes later, Jenny manages to find a forest orientation guide cabin. Hearing the group approaching, she hides in the rotting dumpster nearby, hoping not to be found. Two of them arrive and notice what Jenny took, so fearing she might reach the town before them, they decide to continue searching. Moments later, Jenny emerges from the dumpster and arms herself with a sharp piece of glass. One of the boys approaches her, wanting to help, but unfortunately, Jenny's rage takes over. Thinking it's another attack, she slashes his neck, ending his life. Night falls, and the leader is still looking for Jenny. However, he hears the other girl calling him. When he approaches her, he finds himself at the location where the boy's body lies. One of them is crying heavily for the loss, angry at the elder. He decides to leave, but the leader grabs him, saying he won't, as the recordings show he was involved in the man's death. The young man still wants to put an end to it all and begins calling the police. The elder, not liking it, starts brutally beating him, showing everyone that he's an uncontrollable monster with rage issues. The young girl, scared, runs away from the scene. Meanwhile, Jenny finds the forest exit and reaches the road when a car nearly hits her. A guy seeing Jenny injured asks what happened, but she asks him to take her to town. He starts heading in the opposite direction, saying his brother must have caused some trouble, so he goes back to the forest entrance, leaving Jenny even more fearful. He gets out and meets two of the gang members. Then, seeing they're from the same family, Jenny takes advantage of the distraction, grabs the car keys, and speeds off to escape. As she leaves, she accidentally runs over the other girl, also killing her. Finally, Jenny manages to get off the forest trail and begins her journey to the town. However, on the way, a car blocks her path and forces her into a residence. She gets out of the car and hears the sound of a party, so she goes inside, finding a group of people celebrating. She asks for help, and the group takes her inside the house. Jenny observes everything around her, like a woman resembling one of the deceased boys, two dog bowls, and people seeing their acquaintance's car outside, damaged. She also sees the father of the boys from before and, frightened, asks him to call an ambulance, but the man says they can take care of her. Jenny asks to use the bathroom and locks herself inside. Then she hears the mourning for the loss, where the parents listen to the phone call from the youths explaining what happened to some of them. Jenny stays there as long as she can and hides a blade in her clothes. The father breaks the door, and the crazy young man is already there. The clueless father confronts Jenny about the incident, but she says what the young man said is a lie. Desperate and already expecting the worst from that filthy family, she tries to attack him, but the father is strong and grabs her. Along with the other parents, who are totally similar to the delinquent children, Jenny is terrorized, even though she says the young men started the atrocities. The filthy ones don't believe her, and one of them tells the crazy son to go up to his room, while he and the other scoundrels will kill Jenny in the bathroom. Unfortunately, the movie ends like this, with the demoniac arriving in his room and deleting the footage from the phone, showing himself satisfied with the evil he caused, getting away completely unpunished.